He can wait. He's not going anywhere. That's what the barista said, loud enough for the whole cafe to hear, while the old man sat quietly in the corner booth, hands folded, posture upright. They served joggers, tech workers, tired moms, even couples just walking in. But he waited. 43 minutes. Calm. Still. Like someone who'd been overlooked more times than he could count. Then the door opened. A man in full army dress uniform stepped in. He said nothing, walked straight past the line to the counter. He picked up the lone, untouched cup, black coffee, no sugar, and turned to the old man. "Permission to sit, Sergeant?" The cafe went silent. No one knew who he was, but they were about to learn what real respect looks like. Arthur Lane was the kind of man the world didn't notice anymore. He moved quietly through town like a breeze that never made the leaves stir. People saw him, sure, but they didn't look. Not really. He was a background figure. The kind of person you'd pass a dozen times before realizing you didn't even know his name. 79 years old. Skin weathered but clean-shaven. Silver gray hair, neatly parted to one side. Slacks pressed. Shirt buttoned. Shoes always polished, even when scuffed. He didn't own a smartphone. Didn't wear earbuds. Didn't rush. His watch was analog. His wallet was leather, older than most of the college kids downtown. And his voice, when he used it, was soft, measured, and calm like a man who'd learned long ago that speaking loudly didn't make you right. Arthur lived in a second-floor apartment above a vacant storefront on Main Street. No decorations in the windows, no clutter. Just a modest life, kept tidy. His neighbors barely saw him, though the landlady described him as polite, punctual, and private. He paid rent early every month, with a check, and often left a tin of butter cookies outside her office on holidays. But there was one place Arthur went where people did see him. At least, they saw the shape of him. Penny's Café, every Tuesday, exactly 10:05 a.m. Same booth, third from the window, where the light filtered through faintly dusty glass and cast quiet patterns on the red vinyl cushion. Arthur would step through the door, give a gentle nod to whoever stood behind the counter, whether or not they nodded back, and order the same thing every time. Black coffee, no sugar, thank you. He paid with exact change, never used a card, and always left a $5 tip tucked carefully under the cup before leaving. He didn't bring a laptop, didn't scroll through a phone. He just sat, back straight, eyes gently sweeping the room. Occasionally he brought a notepad and pen. He'd scribble something, fold the page, slide it back into his coat pocket. Sometimes he watched people come and go. Other times he simply looked out the window like he was waiting for someone no one else remembered. Most of the cafe staff just called him the Tuesday guy. Some thought he was lonely. Others assumed he was someone's grandfather killing time. But they didn't know that Arthur Lane had served 26 years in the United States Army, that he was a combat medic who had patched up soldiers under live fire, that he had once carried a wounded Marine half a mile through dense jungle to reach a medevac zone while bleeding from his own shoulder. They didn't know that he never married because he couldn't forget the faces of those he lost, that he spent years working at VA hospitals after retirement, not for the paycheck, but because he understood the language of pain most civilians didn't. They didn't know, because he never told them. Arthur didn't talk about his service, not because he was hiding it, but because he didn't need it to define every room he walked into. He believed that honor wasn't something you wore on your chest. It was something you carried in your posture, your patience, and the way you treated others, especially when no one else was watching. And so, every Tuesday, he showed up, sat in silence, and left a little more quietly than he came in. Until one morning, someone decided that silence deserved to be heard. Penny's Café sat on the corner of Chestnut and Elm, nestled between a yoga studio that smelled like eucalyptus and a boutique dog spa where lattes cost less than a paw massage. Once Penny's had been a quiet place for small-town regulars. Now it had Wi-Fi strong enough to support 5 Zoom calls at once and outlets near every table, by design. It had become the new kind of cafe, part coffee house, part co-working hub, part social feedback drop. There were more phone chargers than napkin holders. The background music was algorithmic. The small chalkboard that used to list community events now featured QR codes for digital punch cards and seasonal hashtags. Maya ran the place. Mid-30s, sharp jawline, sharper sarcasm. She'd started as a barista at 20 and climbed her way to manager, mostly because she didn't quit when everyone else did. The job had worn her thin. Long hours, low patience, high turnover. She didn't smile unless she had to. And even then, only with her mouth, never her eyes. Maya had a system, and she expected it to be followed. Military precision wasn't her thing, but control, that she understood. She didn't have time for sentimental regulars or small-town charm. Her philosophy was simple: in, out, caffeinate, and don't slow down the line. Riley was her latest cashier, a sophomore at the local community college, majoring in media studies but minoring in short attention spans. Purple-dyed bangs, AirPods always in, and a phone that never left her hand. Her fingers tapped faster than she spoke. Her favorite customer interaction was the one that didn't require eye contact. To her, Arthur Lane wasn't a person. He was a timestamp, a recurring presence that didn't require acknowledgement. "Oh, it's Tuesday? Must be old black coffee guy again." She didn't know his name. She didn't ask. To Riley, he was background, less visible than the plants by the window. And Maya didn't correct her. The rest of the staff operated on similar logic. Fast, transactional, minimal engagement, unless a tip jar was involved. And the customers? Mostly younger. Remote tech workers who used the cafe as their second office. Joggers in high-end gear stopping in post-run, sweating and stretching as they ordered smoothies with activated charcoal and oat milk. College kids ordering iced matcha lattes while scrolling through TikTok, barely noticing the world outside their screen. To them, Arthur was just there. The guy in the corner booth who never made noise. The one who didn't order anything fancy. No loyalty card, no refill. Just sat, sipped his black coffee, and left. Some even whispered, he probably doesn't tip. Why does he always take the same booth? Maybe he's lonely and just wants to sit somewhere warm. But the truth was, he did tip. Every time. $5, always in cash, placed neatly beneath the edge of the ceramic saucer. No one noticed, because no one was looking. The culture at Penny's wasn't built for people like Arthur. It was optimized for efficiency, aesthetics, and immediacy. Baristas prioritized drink speed over eye contact. Customers posted photos of latte art, but didn't look at the hands that made it. And the older someone looked, the more invisible they seemed. Arthur didn't mind, not outwardly. He never asked for special treatment, never interrupted, never raised his voice. He gave respect without receiving it and expected nothing in return. But beneath that calm presence, something was building, not in him, in the room, in the culture, in the way people forgot what quiet dignity looked like, until the moment it stood up in uniform and made them remember. It was a Tuesday like any other. Arthur Lane stepped into Penny's Cafe at exactly 10:05 a.m., as he always did. The brass bell above the door gave its familiar chime, but no one looked up. Riley stood at the counter, her eyes glued to her phone, thumbs flying across the screen. Maya was at the espresso machine, already knee-deep in custom orders with names scribbled in Sharpie on biodegradable cups. Arthur waited patiently at the front until Riley noticed him, reluctantly. "Yeah," she said without making eye contact. "I'll have a black coffee, please. No sugar." Riley didn't respond, just tapped the screen twice and muttered, "You can wait. We're slammed." Arthur gave a small nod. Of course. He reached into his wallet, placed a neatly folded $5 bill on the counter, and stepped back. No receipt, no number, no confirmation, just silence. He returned to his usual booth, the third from the window. Outside, the sun fell across the sidewalk, catching on the glass in long, angled rays. Inside, the cafe buzzed with energy, headphones, laughter, low whirring from laptops and blenders. The line moved, people came and went, drinks were called out. "Oat milk chai for Lily. Iced caramel double shot for Jamal." Joggers stopped in, still glistening from their run. College students shouted orders over their earbuds. A mom with 2 toddlers was offered a free cookie. And Riley smiled for them all, But no one brought coffee to the man in the corner booth. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. Arthur didn't fidget. He didn't raise his hand or try to get attention. He just sat there, hands folded, gaze soft, spine upright, watching. 30 minutes. Still nothing. 43 minutes after he'd placed his order, Arthur finally rose. Slowly, carefully. The way a man does when his knees are older than people think. He approached the counter once more. "Excuse me, miss," he said gently. "I just wanted to check. My order may not have gone through the system." Riley didn't even look up. "It's busy," she said flatly. "You'll have to wait." "I only asked for black coffee," Arthur added, still polite, his voice quiet but clear. From behind the espresso machine, Maya snapped, "Sir, we'll get to it when we can. Please step aside. We've got a lot of mobile orders." Riley chuckled, not bothering to mute it this time. "He probably already drank it and forgot," she muttered under her breath. Someone behind Arthur, young, maybe college age, laughed. "Yeah, happens with the old-timers." Arthur didn't react, not even a flicker of offense. He simply nodded once, turned and returned to his booth. There was still no coffee, but there was something heavier now, something that settled over the room like dust in sunlight, the kind of discomfort no one wanted to name, and yet no one moved, no one spoke up. Because when disrespect comes dressed in casual indifference, people barely notice, until someone forces them to. The bell above the door chimed again, but this time it was different. Not the lazy tinkle that blended into espresso steam and indie cafe music. This was sharp, commanding, like a punctuation mark in a sentence that had dragged on too long. Heads turned, not all, but enough to shift the energy in the room. Standing in the doorway was a man who didn't belong, not because he wasn't welcome, but because he didn't need to be. He carried his own presence like a shadow taller than himself. U.S. Army dress blues, sharp as a blade, boots polished to a mirror shine, buttons aligned perfectly with the seams of his coat, metals glinting beneath the soft glow of pendant lights. Major Elijah Warren. He didn't scan his phone, didn't check the menu, didn't queue behind the 3 customers scrolling Instagram while waiting for pumpkin spice. He stepped inside and the cafe went quieter without realizing it. Maya froze mid-pour. Riley's mouth opened, then closed. Elijah's eyes did a slow sweep of the room. Not just casual curiosity, it was assessment, decades of leadership behind that gaze, scanning as if each person were a tactical position on a map. He said nothing. He moved past the register without a glance, past the drink queue, past the murmurs. He didn't need anyone's permission. He arrived at the pickup counter and paused. There, among the towers of elaborate lattes and sugary cold brews, was one forgotten cup, small, plain. Black marker on the side, black coffee, no sugar. A Post-it stuck on the lid, slightly curling at the edge. "Oops, never served?" Without hesitation, Major Warren picked it up, turned, and walked toward the 3rd booth by the window. Arthur Lane looked up and smiled. It was the first genuine smile anyone in the cafe had seen from him. Soft, familiar, like recognition from a different lifetime. Elijah gave a slight nod. His voice was low but carried authority without effort. "Permission to sit, Sergeant?" Arthur gestured with his hand. "Always." The cafe held its breath. Elijah sat across from him, placing the coffee gently on the table like it was something sacred. The 2 men exchanged no small talk, no theatrics, just understanding. Mutual, quiet, heavy with years. Arthur wrapped his hand around the cup. It was still warm. "You waited this long?" Elijah asked, almost disbelieving. Arthur gave a soft shrug. "I've waited through worse, son." That's when something in Elijah changed. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but in recognition. The kind of realization that slams into your chest without words. He stood again, not for effect, but because something had to be said, and it had to be said out loud. What came next would change more than just a room. It would ripple across the entire town and far beyond. Major Elijah Warren stood, slow and deliberate, from the booth. The black coffee cup in his hand wasn't shaking. His voice wasn't loud, but the air shifted, as if even gravity had paused to listen. He turned to face the cafe, where silence had begun to ripple from table to table, clearing out conversation like a tide pulling back before a wave. And then he spoke. "Do you know who this man is?" He wasn't pointing for attention. He wasn't raising his voice for drama. It was the way he said it, calm, grounded, measured, that made every head in the room lift. "This man," he said, nodding to Arthur Lane, "served our country in silence, not in speeches, not on social media, but in mud, under fire, with hands that stopped bleeding and hearts that stopped breaking. For over 2 decades, he stitched together what war tried to tear apart." Arthur sat quietly in the booth, eyes down, as if hearing someone read aloud a letter he never meant for anyone else to see. Elijah continued. "He was a medic in Bosnia, in Lebanon. Before that, in places most of you couldn't pronounce without Googling. He carried wounded soldiers across open fire. He saved civilians trapped under collapsed buildings. He didn't wear a cape. He wore a patch you wouldn't even notice on the jacket he still keeps folded in a drawer." There was no performance in Elijah's words, only reverence, built brick by brick from years of knowing what service actually looked like. "He was my mentor when I was fresh out of ROTC," Elijah added. "I was just a scared young officer with too much pride and not enough wisdom. He taught me how to read a map and how to read a room, which brings me to this one." Elijah turned slowly, scanning the cafe. "You served oat milk to joggers in 7 minutes. I watched someone get a smoothie with sprinkles in under 5. You handed a free cookie to a toddler having a tantrum." He held up the cup. "And you made him wait 43 minutes for this." The cafe didn't just fall silent, it caved inward. Maya stood behind the counter, frozen. Riley had backed into the wall, her phone long forgotten in her apron. "Don't tell me this was a mistake. Mistakes get fixed. Oversight gets corrected. This," he gestured around the room, "this was something else." He took a step forward, his voice lowering. "This was the theft of dignity, the theft of time, the theft of decency." Someone near the door muttered, "Come on, it's just coffee." Elijah turned to him without anger, only clarity. "It's never just coffee. It's what it stands for. You saw a quiet old man and assumed he was no one, that he didn't matter. But let me tell you something." He pointed to Arthur again, who now looked up, calm, proud, but undeniably moved. "That man mattered before any of you were born. He matters now, and he'll still matter when your drink orders are forgotten." Elijah stepped to the counter and gently placed the $5 bill Riley had dismissed earlier onto the register. "I'm taking this coffee," he said, "and no, I won't be paying for it." Riley opened her mouth but couldn't find the words. Elijah leaned forward just slightly, enough for his voice to land with precision. "Because what you took from this man isn't something money can repay." He paused, then turned back to Arthur, bowed his head slightly and said, "Thank you for continuing to show up, even when the world forgets how to look." Arthur, for the first time that day, smiled, and in that moment, everyone saw him, not just as the old man in the booth, but as a man who had once held lives in his hands, and who, in silence, had just held up a mirror to them all. Major Elijah Warren didn't slam the door as he left. He didn't need to. The silence he left behind was louder than anything words could say. The moment Major Elijah Warren walked out of Penny's Café, the room didn't return to normal. It couldn't. The silence he left behind was too deep, too thick to sweep away with the hum of espresso machines or the clinking of ceramic mugs. People went back to their seats, but no one sipped their drinks. The background music resumed, but no one heard it. Conversations didn't resume. They evaporated. Arthur Lane sat there a moment longer, holding the cup he had waited 43 minutes for, as if weighing more than just its contents. He took a sip, still warm. He nodded faintly to himself, finished it with grace, then stood. He placed a $5 bill on the table, just like always, and walked out. No dramatics, no statements. Just a quiet exit from a room that had, for the first time in a long time, finally seen him. But outside those cafe walls, a storm was brewing. In the far corner of Penny's, half hidden behind a ficus and a stack of textbooks, sat a freshman named Marcus Lee. He'd recorded the entire scene on his phone, intending at first to show a few friends the wild thing he'd just witnessed. Instead, he uploaded it to TikTok with a caption that read, "He waited 43 minutes, got more respect in 40 seconds than this cafe gave him all morning." The clip was just under 2 minutes. It was enough. By sundown, it had passed 300,000 views. By midnight, over 1 million. By sunrise, it was on the home pages of Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, and every military support group online. Veterans started commenting first, then their families, then complete strangers who didn't even drink coffee. That wasn't a protest. That was a masterclass in dignity. My dad would have been that man. I hope someone would have stood up for him. Major Warren didn't steal a coffee. He reclaimed something sacred. Within 24 hours, Penny's Café had become ground zero for a national conversation about respect, aging, and the way veterans are treated when their uniforms are no longer visible. Review sites lit up with one-star ratings. Google, Yelp, TripAdvisor, thousands of people from across the country leaving scathing comments about what they called the indifference tax. Penny's average rating fell from 4.6 to 2.1 overnight, but it didn't stop there. The following Tuesday at exactly 10:05 a.m., a black SUV pulled into the parking spot outside Penny's. Out stepped four men, three of them in civilian jackets with military patches and one in full-dress blues. They walked in, ordered 4 black coffees, sat silently in Arthur's booth. They didn't speak to the staff. They didn't bring signs or banners. They drank quietly, left $5 bills under each cup, and exited. The next week there were 7. A week later, 23. Soon veterans began arriving from out of town, some driving 2 hours just to sit for 5 minutes in the booth Arthur once called his own. Some brought coins from their units. Others left handwritten notes. A group of Marines drove in on motorcycles, parked in perfect alignment along the curb, and stood at attention in front of Penny's for 10 full minutes. No explanation, just presence. And then they left. The public called it the Tuesday Watch. It became tradition. No media campaign organized it. No veteran association sanctioned it. It was just something people felt they needed to do, a quiet counterweight to the noise of neglect. Inside the cafe, changes began to appear. The staff wore subdued expressions. Riley stopped using her phone on shift. Maya no longer snapped at customers. A small brass plaque was discreetly installed at Arthur's booth. It read, "Reserved for quiet heroes, seen, remembered, respected." No one dared sit there on Tuesday mornings. Penny's issued an apology on their website, carefully worded, sanitized. It wasn't enough. What mattered more was what happened next. The ripple. Veteran-owned businesses across the country began tagging their cups with, "For the ones who wait." High schools showed the video in civics classes. A cafe in Georgia changed its entire hiring policy to prioritize veterans. A coffee roaster in Colorado released a new blend, Silent Salute, with proceeds going to elder veteran outreach programs. And through it all, Arthur never said a word to the press. He declined interviews, ignored invitations. He still came every Tuesday, but now his coffee was waiting before he even walked through the door. And the world had finally remembered his name. By the 3rd week, the story of Arthur Lane was no longer about one man and a forgotten cup of coffee. It had become something much bigger, something both uncomfortable and necessary. Across the country, people began to ask themselves, how many times have I looked through someone instead of at them? How often have I mistaken silence for irrelevance? Cable news picked it up. Talk shows debated it. Think pieces flooded the internet. But beyond the headlines, it was the quieter conversations around kitchen tables, in break rooms, on front porches that held the real weight. Veterans groups were the first to respond, and their message was unified. Arthur Lane is all of us. They shared their own stories of being overlooked, dismissed, spoken over. Men and women who had worn the uniform, who had sacrificed years of their lives only to return home and be treated as if they were furniture in a crowded room. But it wasn't just veterans. Elderly Americans began speaking up too. Seniors who had been brushed off at pharmacies, ignored in restaurants, talked about like burdens instead of people. A woman from Ohio wrote, "I've been Arthur in church, at the bank, at my own family dinners. People don't even wait for me to finish a sentence. A former Air Force mechanic in Arizona posted, "It's not the coffee. It's the fact that people stop seeing you once your hair turns gray." These weren't complaints. They were laments, quiet acknowledgments that modern culture had drifted into something dangerously efficient, a world where speed trumped kindness and presence was invisible unless it demanded attention. Schools began using the incident as a case study in empathy and ethics. In one high school civics class, students were asked, "What does it mean to serve your country? And what does it mean to be served by it in return?" The most common answer: "It means being remembered when it no longer benefits anyone to remember you." Faith communities joined the conversation. Sermons echoed the sentiment that honor isn't just for those who fight, but for those who endure without bitterness. That the way we treat the quiet, the patient, the elderly, reflects more about our character than any pledge or flag ever could. At the heart of it all was Arthur Lane. Not because he sought it, but because he didn't. He never asked for attention, never made a speech, never called the media. He simply showed up, week after week, quiet, steady, consistent. And when someone finally stood up for him, he didn't gloat. He just sipped his coffee, tipped his server, and walked out the same way he came in, dignified, unseen, and whole. That, people began to realize, was the lesson. That respect isn't earned through noise, but shown through stillness. That patience isn't weakness, and quietness isn't insignificance. And that in a world obsessed with going viral, maybe the most radical thing someone can do is simply show up, over and over, until the world has no choice but to see them. Arthur Lane never intended to start a movement. He never posted a video, never wrote a letter to the editor, never stood on a stage or held a sign. He didn't need to. His life, in its quiet consistency, spoke more than words ever could. And in the end, that's what people remembered. For months after the confrontation at Penny's Café, the booth by the window remained sacred ground. People didn't just sit there. They paused, reflected. Some left challenge coins or folded notes. Others brought their fathers, their children, just to show them where it all began. And Arthur, he never changed his routine. Every Tuesday, 10:05 a.m., he walked through the door. Same black coffee, same booth, same $5 tip. No interviews, no cameras, just presence. The staff, now deeply different from the team that once ignored him, prepared his cup before he even reached the register. Riley no longer worked there, but the newer baristas knew who he was, not because of fame, but because of how people spoke of him, not in awe, but in respect. Maya, still manager, began a quiet tradition of her own. At the end of every shift, she placed one cup of black coffee on the corner of the counter, no sugar, no cream, and left it there until close, just in case he ever needed one more. And then, one Tuesday morning, Arthur didn't come. At first, people waited. Maybe he was late. Maybe the rain had slowed him down. But by 10:30, the room felt different. A week passed, then another. No one dared sit in his booth. It wasn't until a modest obituary appeared in the back page of the town paper that the truth quietly settled across the cafe. Arthur Lane passed away in his sleep, peacefully, at age 80. No immediate family, no funeral announcement, no eulogy, but the town gave him one anyway. That following Tuesday, Penny's didn't open to the public. Instead, the staff unlocked the doors early for veterans, neighbors, and strangers who had only known Arthur through a screen or through the silence he left behind. People came from out of state, some in uniform, some in jackets with fading unit patches, some just in plain clothes, hands in their pockets, unsure what to say. No speeches were given. No microphone was needed. At exactly 10:05 a.m., the cafe filled with the quiet sound of ceramic cups being placed on wooden tables. One by one, black coffees appeared in front of empty chairs, and when it was over, they left $5 bills, folded neatly, beneath every cup. In the days that followed, the staff installed a small brass plaque on the wall above his booth. It read, "Arthur Lane Veteran, Gentleman, he never asked to be seen, but he reminded us how to look." The impact didn't stop there. Veteran organizations across the country launched the Silent Service campaign, encouraging communities to honor elderly veterans not with parades, but with presence, a moment, a handshake. a seat at the table. Coffee shops nationwide began designating tables with a single black coffee and a note for the ones who served quietly. And every year on the second Tuesday of November, cafes from Seattle to Savannah observe what they now call Lane Day, a morning where no music is played, no drinks are named out loud, and the first black coffee of the day is always free, served without question to whomever sits in the third booth from the window. Arthur never asked for any of it. He simply showed up, and in doing so he left a legacy not of speeches, but of stillness, not of recognition, but of remembrance, a legacy that reminded a nation that quiet dignity is not the absence of strength, but the purest form of it. Arthur Lane never wanted to be a symbol, but sometimes the most powerful symbols are the ones that never asked to be seen. His story wasn't about a viral moment or public outrage. It wasn't even about the coffee. It was about presence, about what it means to keep showing up, even when the world stops noticing, even when people forget to say thank you, even when kindness is replaced with convenience and silence is mistaken for weakness. Arthur reminded us that respect is not something we shout. It's something we give, freely and often, especially to those who no longer ask for it. So let me ask you, have you ever known someone like Arthur? Someone who showed up quietly and faithfully, no matter how the world changed around them? Someone who deserved more than they ever received? If so, tell us about them in the comments. We want to read those stories, and so do others. And if you've ever felt like Arthur, unseen, unheard, overlooked, know that you are not alone. This community sees you, and we honor you. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it with someone who needs a reminder of what quiet dignity looks like. Sometimes the smallest acts, a handshake, a chair, a cup of coffee, become the loudest echoes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. We tell real stories about real people, the ones who may never go viral, but who change the world one quiet act at a time. Until next time, take care of those who wait patiently. And remember, the ones who speak the least often carry the most.